Assalamualaikum and hi. My name is NURUL SURAYA binti SYUKRI with metric number 2021470614. I'm here to present about sourcing decision in agricultural supply chain. In this chapter, we have 6 learning objectives. The first one, we need to understand the role of sourcing in a supply chain. Next, we discuss factors that affect the decision to outsource a supply chain function. After that, we can identify dimensions of supplier performance that affect total cost. And then, we learn structure successful auction and negotiation in this chapter. The next learning objective is describe the impact of risk sharing on supplier performance and information distortion. Last but not least, we learn about the design a tailored supplier portfolio. Sourcing is the entire set of business processes required to purchase goods and services. For any supply chain function, the most significant decision is whether to outsource the function or perform it in-house. Outsourcing results in the supply chain function being performed by a third party. Outsourcing decisions are important and tend to vary across firms and industries. We address the outsourcing of supply chains activities by a firm based on the following 3 questions. First one, will the third party increase the supply chain surplus relative to performing the activities in-house? Number 2, to what extent do risks grow open outsourcings? Number 3, are there strategic reasons to outsource? There are 5 roles of sourcing in a supply chain. The first one, supply scoring and assessment. Supplier performance should be compared on the basis of the supplier's impact on total cost, and there are several other factors besides purchase price that influence total cost. These factors include the price of the product in the question, the number of producers, the input cost, the technological changes, the price of other possible products, and unpredictable factors such as weather. The second one is supplier selection. We must identify one or more appropriate suppliers, and then contract should account for all factors that affect supply chain performance and should be designed to increase supply chain profit in a way that benefit both the supplier and the buyer. Thirdly, design collaboration. About 80% of the cost of a product is determined during design. Suppliers should be actively involved at this stage. Design collaboration can result in easier to manufacture and distribute products, resulting in lower overall costs. This factor is especially important for components and contributes significantly to the cost and value of the products. After that, procurement. A supplier sends product in response to orders placed by the buyers. Order placed and delivered on schedule at the lowest possible overall cost. Last but not least, sourcing planning and analysis. It's analyze spending across various suppliers and component categories. To identify opportunities for decreasing the total cost. Okay, now we move to the cost of goods sold. What is a cost of goods sold? Cost of goods sold, or COGS, represents well over 50% of sale for most major manufacturers. It purchased part a much higher fraction than in the past. Companies have reduced vertical integration and outsource. There are some of the benefits from effective sourcing decision. The first one is identifying the right source can result in an activity performed at higher quality and lower cost. The better economies of scale can be achieved if orders within a firm are aggregated. After that, more efficient procurement transactions can significantly reduce the overall cost of purchasing. This is the most important for items for which a large number of low-value transactions occur. The design collaboration can result in products that are easier to manufacture and distribute, resulting in lower overall costs. This factor is most important for components This factor is most important for components that contribute a significant amount to product cost and value. And then, good procurement processes can facilitate coordination with supplier and improve forecasting and planning. Better coordinations lowers inventories and improve the matching of supply and demand. Furthermore, the appropriate sharing of risks and benefits can result in higher profit for both the supplier and the buyer. Lastly, the firm can achieve a lower purchase price by increasing competition through the use of auction. Now we move to the in-house or outsource. The decision to outsource is based on the increase in supply chain surplus provided by the third party as well as the increase in risk associated with using a third party. Companies should consider outsourcing if the increase in surplus is significant with only a minor increase in risk. If the surplus growth is small or the risk increase is large, performing the function in-house is preferable. Here, we discuss various mechanisms that the third parties can use to grow the surplus. The first one is capacity aggregation. By aggregating demand across multiple companies and gaining production economies of scale that no single company can achieve on its own, a third party can increase the supply chain surplus. This is the most common reason for a supply chain to outsource production. The second one is inventory aggregation. A third party can increase the supply chain surplus by aggregating inventories across a large number of customers. The third one is transportation aggregation by transportation intermediaries. A third party may increase the surplus by aggregating the transportation function to a higher level than any shipper can on its own. The fourth one is the transportation aggregation by storage intermediaries. By aggregating inbound and outbound transportation, a third party that stores inventories can also increase supply chain surplus. Okay, now we move to the warehousing aggregation. It's a third party may increase the supply chain surplus by aggregating warehousing needs across multiple firms. Surplus growth is achieved through lower real estate costs and lower processing costs within the warehouse. Saving from warehousing aggregation occur when companies' warehousing needs are small or fluctuate over time. And next is procurement aggregation. If a third party aggregate procurement for many small players and facilitates economies of scale in ordering, production, and inbound transportation, the supply chain surplus increase. Procurement aggregation works best when there are many small buyers. The next one is information aggregation. A third party may increase the surplus aggregating information to a higher level than a company performing the function in-house can. All retailers compile product information from multiple manufacturers into a single location. Customers' stress costs are reduced as a result of this information aggregation. The next one is receivable aggregation. A third party may increase the supply chain surplus if it can aggregate the receivable risk to a higher level than the firm, or it has a lower collection cost than the firm. Okay, the next one is a relationship aggregation. By reducing the number of relationships required between multiple buyers and sellers, an intermediary can increase supply chain surplus. Connecting 1,000 sellers to 1,000,000 buyers without an intermediary requires 1,000,000,000 relationships. The presence of an intermediary reduces the required number of relationships to slightly more than 1,000,000. The last one is lower cost and higher quality. If a third party provides lower cost or higher quality than the firm, it can increase the supply chain surplus. If these advantages results from specialization and learning, they are likely to be long-term. Over time, a specialized third party that is further along the learning curve or some supply chain activity is likely to maintain its advantage. Now we move to the factors. So, the three important factors influence the increase in surplus provided by the third party, which is scales, uncertainty, and specificity of asset. If the scale is large, sufficient economies of scale are likely to be achieved within the firm itself. In this case, a third party is unlikely to achieve additional scale economies and increase the supplies. So, Walmart has enough scale in the term of transportation needs to achieve economies of scale on trucking on its own. Going to the third party would reduce the surplus and result in some loss of control. In contrast, if a firm's need do not provide sufficient economies of scale, a third party can significantly increase the surplus. The next one is the uncertainty of a firm's need is the second important factors. If the needs are predictable, the surplus increase from a third party is limited, especially if the firm has sufficient skill. In contrast, if the firm's need change frequently, the third party can increase the surplus by aggregating with other customers. Finally, the specificity of assets required by the third party influence surplus growth. If the assets required are unique to a company and cannot be used by another, a third party is unlikely to increase the surplus because all it does is move the assets from one company to another. The third party has no way of aggregating across other customers. A lack of capital or a third party with a much lower cost of capital is one reason a firm may outsource to a third party even if none of the previously mentioned factors suggest outsourcing. In their case, the third party can increase the surplus by bringing lower cost capital into the supply chain. This table summarizes the discussion on how and when a third party can increase supply chain surplus. There are a few risks of using a third party. First, the process is broken. The most serious issue arises when a company outsources supply chain functions simply because it has lost control of the process. Remember that bringing a third party into a broken supply chain process only makes it worse and more difficult to control. The first step should be to bring the process under control, followed by a cost-benefit analysis before deciding on outsourcing. The second risk is underestimation of the cost of coordination. When it comes to outsourcing, a common mistake is underestimating the effort required to coordinate activity across multiple entities performing supply chain tasks. This is especially true if a company intends to outsource specific supply chain functions to third-party vendors. Outsourcing functions to a large number of third parties is feasible and can be very effective if the firm considers coordination to be one of its core strengths. The third one is reduce customer or supplier contact. By introducing an intermediary, a company may lose customer or supplier contact. The loss of customer contact is especially significant for businesses that sell directly to consumers but choose to use a third party to collect incoming orders or deliver outgoing product. So the fourth one is the loss of internal capability and growth in third-party power. A firm may choose to keep a supply chain function in-house if outsourcing will significantly increase the third party's power. The next risk is the leakage the sensitive data and information. Using a third party necessitates the sharing of demand information and, in some cases, intellectual property. Leakage is always a risk when a third party also serves competitors. Firms have frequently on firewalls within a third party. But a firewalls increase asset specificity, limiting the surplus growth that the third party can provide. When leakage is a concern, particularly with regard to intellectual property, business frequently choose to keep the function in-house. And the next risk is ineffective contracts. Contract with performance metric that distort the third party's incentive often significantly reduce any gains from outsourcing. The seventh risk is loss of supply chain visibility. The introduction of third parties reduce the visibility of supply chain operation, making it more difficult for the firm to respond quickly to local customer and market demands. This loss of visibility can be especially damaging in long supply chain. Lastly, the risk of using the third party is negative reputational impact. In many instances, action regarding labor or the environment taken by the third party can have a significant negative impact on the reputation of the firm. Business make the fundamental mistake of focusing solely on the goods price when making an outsourcing decision or comparing suppliers, ignoring the fact that many factors affect the total cost of using suppliers, for example, have varying replenishment lead times. It is worthwhile to choose a more expensive supplier with a shorter lead time. Consider suppliers with a varying on-time performance. It is the more dependable supplier with the few extra pennies per piece. In each of these instances, the price charged by the supplier is only one of many factors that affect the supply chain surplus. It is important to focus on the total cost of ownership when selecting suppliers. Total cost of ownership or TCO include all supply chain costs of sourcing a good or service from a particular supply and can be considered in three buckets, which is acquisition cost, ownership cost, and post-ownership costs. Acquisition costs include all costs associated with a purchasing material from a supplier until it is delivered to a buyer and ready for use. Supplier price, supplier term affecting financing costs, taxes and duties, delivery costs, and incoming quality costs are all included in this cost. Acquisition costs should include the overhead associated with managing the relationship and planning the purchase. Now we move to the ownership cost. Ownership costs include all costs associated with a purchase part from when it arrived from the supplier to when the finished product is sold to the customer. These costs include inventory costs, warehousing costs, manufacturing or conversion costs, production quality costs, and production cycle time costs. Now we move to the post-ownership costs. Post-ownership costs include all expenses incurred by the company after the finished product has been delivered to the customer. Warranty costs, environmental costs, product liability costs, and reputational costs are examples of these costs. When scoring and assessing suppliers, one can organize the factor influencing total cost as shown in this table. Okay, now we move to the supplier selection with auction and negotiation. The company must decide whether the use of single sourcing or multiple suppliers before selecting suppliers. Supplier selection can be performed through competitive bids, reverse auction, and direct negotiation. Supplier evaluation is based on total cost of using a supplier. When a supplier must make a significant buyer-specific investment, single sourcing ensures the supplier's significant business. The auction is include sealed bid first price auction, English auction, Dutch auction, and second price auction. The meaning of negotiation is the difference between the value of the buyers and seller is bargaining surplus. The goal of each negotiating party is to capture as much of the bargaining surplus as possible. It have a clear idea of your own value and as good an estimate of the third party's value as possible. It look for a fair outcome based on equally or equitably dividing the bargaining supplies and a win-win outcome. In the absence of risk sharing in a supply chain, locally optimal decisions are made, lowering total supply chain profit. In the absence of risk sharing, retailers aim for less product availability than is required to maximize supply chain profits. Independent action taken by two parties in a supply chain often results in profit that are lower than those that could be achieved if the supply chain were to coordinate in its action. The three contracts that increase overall profits by making the suppliers share some of the buyer's demand uncertainty are buyback or return contracts, revenue sharing contracts, and quantity flexibility contract. Risk sharing through buyback. A buyback or return clause allows a retailer to return unsold inventory up to specific amount at an agreed open price. In this case, the supplier is sharing risk by agreeing to buy back unsold inventory at the retailer. In a buyback contract, the manufacturer specifies a wholesale price C along with a buyback price B at which the retailer can return any unsold unit at the end of the season. We assume that the manufacturer can salvage millions for any units that retailer returns. The manufacturer has a cost of V per unit produced. The retail price is P. Now is the risk sharing through revenue sharing. The manufacturer charge the retailer a low wholesale price C and shares a fraction of F of the retailer's revenue. It allows both the manufacturer and retailer to increase their profits, a result in lower retailer effort, and it requires an information infrastructure, and the information distortion results in excess inventory in the supply chain and a greater mismatch of supply and demand. And last but not least is the risk sharing using quantity flexibility. Risk sharing in a supply chain boosts profits for both the supplier and the retailer. Buybacks, revenue sharing, and quantity flexibility are all risk sharing mechanisms. When a supplier sells to multiple buyers or has excess flexible capacity, quantity flexibility contracts result in less information distortion than buyback or revenue sharing contract. And the next point is designing a sourcing portfolio, which is the tailored sourcings. Firm has many options when it comes to who to source from and where to source from when it comes to structuring a supplier portfolio. In terms of whom, a company must decide whether to produce in-house or outsource to a third party. In addition, the company must decide whether the supply source will be cost-effective or responsive. In terms of where, a company can choose between onshoring, nearshoring, and offshoring. Onshoring is the practice of producing a product in the market where it is sold, even if it is in a high-cost location. Offshoring is referred to producing the product at a low-cost location that may be far from the market. In this section, we discuss a variety of factors that influence the design of the sourcing portfolio. So, this table identifies factors that favor the selection of a responsive or low-cost source. In general, responsive sources will be onshore or nearshore to allow for a quick response. Low-cost source can be found anywhere, but cost is frequently the primary reason for going offshore or nearshore. we identify some factors that influence the sourcing location decision in this table. So, for making sourcing decision in practice, use multifunction teams. Multifunctional collaboration within a firm result in effective sourcing strategies. A purchasing group sourcing strategy is likely to be relatively narrow and focused on purchase price. A strategy developed in collaboration with purchasing, manufacturing, engineering, and planning is much more likely to identify the correct total cost drivers. The collaboration must be extended beyond strategy formulation to procurement phase because the manufacturing and engineering are most likely to reap the full benefit of a good sourcing strategy at that point. Ensure appropriate coordination across region and business units. Coordination of purchasing across all region and business units enable a company to maximize purchasing's economy of scale while also lowering transaction costs. Other benefits of improved sourcing, such as improved supply chain coordination and design collaboration, may necessitate strong involvement at the business unit level. Requiring global coordination across all business units may make this effort more difficult. MRO supplies, for example, benefit the most from coordinated purchasing across geography and business units because transaction cost and total purchase volume has significant impact on total cost. Always evaluates the total cost of ownership. Price reduction should not be the sole goal of an effective sourcing strategy. All factors influencing total cost of ownership should be identified and used in supplier selection. Supplier performance should be measured along all relevant dimensions and the impact on total cost should be quantified. A buyer can also better identify opportunities for better collaboration in design, planning and fulfillment by focusing on the total cost of ownership. Last but not least is build long-term relationship with key suppliers. A fundamental principle of good sourcing is that a buyer and supplier working together can generate more savings opportunities than the two parties working separately. Solid cooperation is more likely to occur when the two parties have a long-term relationship and a level of trust. A long-term relationship encourages the supplier to focus more on issues that are important to a specific buyer. This includes investing in buyer-specific technology and collaborating on design. A long-term relationship also improves the two parties' communication and coordination. These abilities are critical when sourcing direct materials. As a result, long-term relationship with supplier of critical and strategic direct materials should be fostered. And that's all from me. Thank you.